Hey, everybody. Doing a little change of pace here, doing a Substack Live solo. This will probably be a relatively abbreviated edition of it. We've got some podcasts coming up. Actually, one of them will be a Substack Live that will turn into a podcast after the fact next week. I'll have that out in an email and on Substack soon. We'll have Representative Tom Opal, who has been a friend of mine for over 20 years, and he represents the good folks up in Grafton County, including the town of Canaan, which is a little bit outside of the Upper Valley, Hanover, Lebanon area. And Tom has been a political professional, used to work as one of the country's best uh, general consultants in the political world. That's how I met him way back in 2002. And Tom has lived in New Hampshire for many, many years and is now a state rep, a first term state rep. And we're going to talk about a lot of things. He was in the legislature last week uh, trying to get a bill reintroduced that was killed last year that would try to get at how do we get additional revenue into state coffers to pay for education, because the Supreme Court has told us to do that. Tom has tried to grab that one by the lapels and do something about it. And we're going to talk about that as well, because it brings up some big time statewide issues. And I appreciate Tom's leadership on that. He's a great guy. We will do that next Tuesday at noon, and you'll get more information about that. Apologize, just coming back from illness. Been sick for the last week, so the voice is still coming back. But last night, and I see folks are rolling in. We'll give folks a few minutes here to jump in. I see that Tom Opal has just joined, and Tom, you may have missed it. I was just bragging about you for a moment. Next Tuesday, again, Tom and I will be doing a Substack Live. Got a ton to go over with Tom, and I'm very much looking forward to that next Tuesday. But what I wanted to take a little bit of time here, and if folks have questions or comments, please feel free. I will keep my eye on the bottom of the screen here for that. Last night, uh, a little earlier, thanks, Cora. And Cora suggesting some tea. I don't have the fresh ginger, I do have the honey. And it does say I love corgis. That is definitely true. Last night we had what is the beginning of, it's the bell went off for 2026. Obviously, a lot of attention on 2025 elections, most of that attention on the New York City mayoral race and the governor's races in New Jersey and Virginia. Obviously, good news for Democrats generally across the country, including in California with Prop 50, that will allow them to redraw the maps midterm and probably cross out Texas, it appears, in that regard. And there were other races in Georgia for public utilities, in Pennsylvania for Supreme Court, you name it. New Hampshire, of course, had a ton of races too. In our 13 cities across the state that range from Manchester and Nashua all the way down to some of our smaller communities that are incorporated like cities like Berlin. A couple of key points there I just want to mention as I look at folks and any potential questions or comments you might have. But then I want to get into the meat of it, which was last night's premiere of our Tipping Point show, which was well attended, and I think there was a just tremendous amount of feedback that is going to help me refine it further, and I think gives us a window into the enthusiasm Democrats are feeling at the moment for the 2026 elections, as we should. So, one thing in particular I wanted to mention about 2025, about a couple nights ago, there was a special election for state representative in Berlin, the northernmost city in New Hampshire. For those of you, I know we got some folks not from New Hampshire that have already jumped in. A lot of our Substack followers are out of state. And Berlin used to be one of the most democratic communities in the entire state. It is up in Coos County, a dominant, traditionally French Canadian community of blue collar workers, was a vibrant mill town, particularly paper mill town. And of course, like much of America with that profile, it has declined economically over the past several decades, and particularly over the last 25 years or so. And as a consequence, the politics of Berlin and the county up there in general, Coos County, have changed quite a bit. So we had a special election last night because there was uh, a resignation of a Republican who had won in 2024 to take another job in government. And so we had that special election that coincided with city elections yesterday. And we had Mark Tremblay, who had been a one-term state rep and has been very active in local Berlin government and politics. And on the Democratic side, we had a good friend of mine, Corinne Cascaden, who was a former Democratic state rep. She was defeated in 2024. Trump overwhelmed in Coos County, and no Democrat survived, including Corinne, who was probably our strongest candidate up there. She's been a superintendent. She's been an educator for decades. She is an institution in Greater Berlin and well beyond. She was the best candidate we could have run in that special election. So here's what happens: in the midst of all the reporting of the elections from Tuesday night in New Hampshire, there were some media outlets that said Republicans should be especially excited because Tremblay narrowly won out of about 1,800 votes that were cast in that election. He won by 13 votes. There'll be a recount, but 13 vote margin on Tuesday night. Tremblay, the Republican, defeated Cascaden, the Democrat. Whoa, that's a sign that Republicans, maybe it wasn't so bad. And this is where I've got to push back, and the data are painfully clear for Democrats on this one. Um, Berlin was a Democratic stronghold. It is no longer. In fact, as we'll get into in a moment with the work for 2026 I'm doing through Move the Goalposts, Berlin in 2026, the Partisan Voter Index, my PVI, that reflects how a community votes in statewide general elections relative to the state overall. Berlin in 2026 will have a Republican PVI. It'll not by much, but it'll be by about a quarter point, a quarter point. And that'll be the first time, as far as I can go back, probably since before World War II, and maybe a lot further back, could be pre-FDR, that Berlin will vote more Republican than the state overall. And that's where it's at. So I would argue strongly that uh, the Democrat, Corinne Cascaden, nearly pulling it out, losing by only 13 pending a recount. That's less than a 1% defeat, actually is a pretty impressive performance by Corinne, and is not a reflection of Republican strength up there. The greater reflection of Republican strength in Berlin is much broader. It is a decade, really almost 20-year trend line. And again, Coos County, which has been shrinking in population, also has no Democratic state reps right now. I had a meeting with the Coos County Democratic Committee last week, and I think that there's opportunities, particularly in a good to great Democratic midterm, and I think we may be getting there, for Democrats to win between 1 and 3 of those Coos County seats. I think there are 4 of them that are potentially in play, and I think we can win at least a couple of them. Probably a necessary part of Democrats' mission to win back the New Hampshire House in 2026. And we're going to have to look for those seats in a lot of places, which brings up a good transition perhaps to what we did last night. Last night, premiere of what we call the tipping point forecast. Been doing this for the last couple of election cycles, been refining the method, and I think it's a pretty good one. It is proven to be very accurate to project as we approach election day what the down ballot results will be, particularly for the New Hampshire House, New Hampshire Senate. We are 362 days away from Election Day, which happens to coincide with Sandy, my wife, and my 25th wedding anniversary. That's going to make for some interesting decisions on November 3rd, 2026, but we will figure that out. For today, we'll stick to politics that is not household politics. And so we went through that last night. This was a little early for doing it. Last cycle, my first projections were in February of the election year. So we are a good 3+ months ahead of it. And that presents some limitations, a little bit like a hurricane being far off the shore, trying to project where the hurricane will hit is much harder when it's off the shore. And so they call that the cone of uncertainty, the cone of where it may strike the coast. As it gets closer, that cone narrows until, of course, it finally makes landfall. For us, landfall will be Election Day 2026. There are many variables that we do not know yet. And as we said last night, there are the known knowns, there are the known unknowns, and then there are the unknown unknowns. Tip to Donald Rumsfeld, who I was told is still with us. That came up a lot as Dick Cheney passed away the other day. They were cohorts in the Bush administration. Well, he used to talk about that in the context of the Iraq War, and it's true in forecasting the 2026 elections as well. There's a few broad points I want to make, and I will have on my YouTube page probably late tonight or tomorrow. I'll have a recording of the broadcast. It's a long one. Eventually, we'll chop it down into little bits for folks that just want the highlights. But with the Q&A, it was a banger. It was almost 2 hours long, and we had some great conversation. But we've got some work to do on that. So I am going to look this up here. And there's a handful of points I want to make looking at last night's presentation and and give you some highlights and hopefully take a few questions. So first of all, we went through the tools that we use. Like there's 400 seats, there's 203 House districts in New Hampshire, and of course they are not all created equal in any way. Some of them are incredibly blue, like Hanover, Durham, some of the college towns, some of the more liberal wards, and some of the cities. That is consistent with the country in a lot of ways. So and of course, they're very different in size. We have rules about how you can draw districts. And although there is some gerrymandering Republicans did after the 2020 elections, it's not all gerrymandering that creates these quirks. Some of it are the laws about how you draw the district. So, for example, we have a single seat district that represents Windham and Londonderry that in a presidential year could have upwards of over 20,000 people voting for one New Hampshire House seat out of 400. There are other districts that'll have 3 seats with 5,000 people voting, deciding on those 3 seats. And so one of the things that we evaluate in all of these to rank and prioritize the House districts in 26 is resource intensity. If you can win up to 3 House seats, flip or protect up to 3 House seats in a competitive district in a place where you might get 5,000 voters next year fighting for 3 seats, that's very attractive compared to a single seat, what they call a flotarial district, that could easily, even in an off-year election, have north of 10,000. It's more money to send mail. It's a lot more manpower to volunteer and staff to knock on targeted doors. It's much harder. And the name of the game here is resource deployment. Where can we put the money and the volunteer time and the focused attention in the places that will do the most for marginal benefit at the end of the day to do the thing that Democrats need to do a lot better in New Hampshire and nationally, and that is win. This is all about maximizing winning, and in the context of the New Hampshire House, winning a majority, and hopefully with a little elbow room, a little above 201, to win the majority in the New Hampshire House. So we talked about the PVI, Partisan Voter Index. This is the way to measure how much more Republican or Democrat your House district is compared to the state overall. The reality is this: most of the action in House races, and I've been looking at this for parts of almost 20 years now, and I'm looking up some of the data here so I can read it, is in the districts that are closest to dead zero, the ones that are no more than 3 points more partisan than the state overall. They're kind of the bellwethers. This should not be a surprise. Right now, out of 400 seats, the Democrats have 26 seats that are in what I call the light blue range. And we won about 70% of them in 2024. We went 18-8. Good enough to win you the Cy Young Award in baseball, but given what I'm going to tell you in a moment, probably not quite good enough for Democrats if we want to win the House back in 2026. So job one is you got to protect your home turf. You got to hold serve, and you've got to win all or virtually all of the seats that have a blue PVI. The Republicans had exactly double that many very light red seats. They had 52 of them rather than 26. And coincidentally, they won the exact same percentage of the vote, about 69%. So Democrats won 18 out of 26 light blue. Republicans won 36 out of 52 light red. Literally the same percentage, but they have double the light red versus light blue seats. And that's a big deal because if Democrats are going to win back the majority, we're going to have to crush it with the light red seats because it turns out of 400 seats, only 171 of them have a Democratic lean to them that are our home turf. Some of them by this much, some of them by this much, but you can't get to 201 if you're Democrats if you're not pretty much holding serve with almost all of the 171 blue leaning seats. And so in 2024, we won 160 of them. That's a 94% win rate. That's good. Not quite as good as we did a few years earlier. We're going to have to juice that a little bit more in order to get to the promised land of a majority. The Republicans now, they won 92%, just a slightly lower percentage of their red seats, but they have so many more red seats, 229 red seats, 171 blue leaning seats. We have to win a higher percentage of them. And then obviously we're going to have to use the tennis analogy, we're going to have to break serve several dozen times, probably at least 35 to 40 red seats in order to get a majority overall of the New Hampshire House. Here's the thing. There's a second layer of seats. I mentioned the light blue and light red. There's the medium blue and the medium red. And we talked about this a lot last night. They're the ones that have a PVI, a lean of 4 to 6 points more Democratic than the state or more Republican than the state. Now, whereas I could show you every cycle a slew of Democrats winning in R plus twos or vice versa, I could show you some Democrats winning in an R plus 4, 5, 6, or a Republican winning in a D plus 4, 5, 6. But it gets scarce quick. How scarce? Well, here's what it is. Whereas Democrats won about 70% of the blue seats, that means Republicans won about 30% of the blue seats and vice versa. There were 52 medium blue seats, this kind of medium range I'm talking about. Democrats won 49 of the 52 medium blue. That's a 94% win rate. Republicans have more medium red seats. They have 62 instead of 52. And they went 61 and 1. That's Tom Brady kind of numbers. That's a 98% win rate. They went 61 and 1 in the medium red seats. And that means every seat that we don't hold, I say we as a lifelong Democrat, every seat that we don't hold in the light blue, every seat that we don't flip in the light red means that in order to get to 201 or greater, we have to go deeper into the bag. We have to go deeper into the reds in order to make up for not winning, holding a light blue or flipping a light red. And historically, it is very, very hard for the out party, the opposite party, to win more than about 10% of those medium color, medium red, medium blue seats. So given that the Republicans have 62 of the medium red, if we are expecting to win much more than about 10 of those, that means doing something that historically has proven to be elusive for both parties. So we're going to have to hold our own medium blue. We're going to have to try to flip high single digit medium red. And then the last one are the ones that are super blue and super red. So this is an important point because it's a microcosm of the country's, the two parties' composition at a national level. The Democrats have 93 seats out of 400 in New Hampshire that are deep blue. That is to say D7 or bluer. These are the really blue ones. 93 of them. Last year, won all 93. 93 and 0. Republicans have many more. They have 115 deep red, R7 or redder. And they actually lost 2 of them. They went 113 and 2. You will go a whole election cycles and have 0 seats in the super blue, super red get flipped. So the fact that Democrats won 2 of them is actually noteworthy. What were those 2? They're 2 really fun guys, two guys I call friends. One is Mark Vallone, the veteran of politics, former principal and educator in Epping. Epping is one of these blue-collar towns in Rockingham County that has been floating further and further red over the last 20 plus years. It continues to. It's about an R7 and a quarter. And not only did Mark win, Mark was the top vote getter in a multi-seat district. So Mark is one of them. The other is Charlie St. Clair. out in Laconia. Laconia, his district, it's about an R. It's about R+7. It is a tough district, and Charlie is the longtime head of Motorcycle Week at Wares Beach. So when folks go, how do we recruit candidates that are able to overperform relative to their district or even the top of the ticket? The answer is be a longtime beloved principal and educator with deep family roots, like Mark Vallone. Be Charlie St. Clair, run Motorcycle Week, which is an epic century-long event in the Lakes region, and do that. The one Democrat who won in a medium red, I told you it was 61-1. The one was Hope Damon, another wonderful, wonderful person and a wonderful rep. She's out in a rural part of Western New Hampshire that continues out to Claremont. So it's got some kind of um, a blue collar small city. It's got some blue leaning kind of Sunapee type, more liberal, and it's got some rural red in the middle. Big sprawling district, hard district, R+4. Hope became famous. Featured in the New York Times several years ago when she helped lead an effort to take a group of free staters who had, in a sneaky way, it basically eliminated the budget for the Croydon School District by finding a loophole, getting a handful to show up on a key day and winning with literally a couple dozen people. And then they had to get more than half of the entire town's eligible population to vote for a revote, which was hard. They did it. Hope was one of the leaders of it, along with several other wonderful people, and they were able to achieve that. Hope became pretty famous and beloved, and has allowed her to wildly overperform. So whether it's a principal and teacher, whether it's Motorcycle Week, whether it's somebody who was a community leader in a high profile way, it doesn't matter. There are a lot of ways to become an overperformer, but it just happens the only three Democrats in the legislature that have been able to win in 2024 in Republican districts of R+4 or redder all had a similarly compelling, unique personal story that allowed them to blow through what most candidates would have done. In recruiting, this is one of the things, and it's one of the things that through my political action that I try to help with is recruiting, identifying and recruiting candidates that have these special stories that allow them to blow through it. So one of the tools that we use to do this is actually, it's called PACO, Points Above Expected Candidate Outcome. And one of the ways that we measure it is we built a model that takes a replacement level Democrat, puts them in a district, measures how they would do given the environment that ended up happening, and then compares it to the actual Democrat who ran. Do some stuff with it. That result of that work is called PACO. And it basically says how much of a candidate's performance can we probably credit to the unique characteristics of the candidate as compared to the top of the ticket, the national environment, or even the PBI of the district itself. It is not a coincidence that Hope, Charlie, and Mark were three of the highest PACO scores in New Hampshire. And so it's somebody who's a former football coach, a retired teacher, retired fire or police, somebody with deep roots in the community, and who's run nonprofits. There are a lot of ways to build that profile. But when we're recruiting, now we can use the PACO tool, which has been established for some time, in order to help recruit candidates who think we might have good future PACO scores. That sip was for you, Cora. That tea is helping out quite a bit. So we use the PACO score as well. One other thing I want to mention, when we look at the distribution of the seats, how many D+12s are there? How many R+3s are there? And so forth. What we find is that Republicans have this much steadier number of seats at every point along the PBI spectrum on the Republican side. They have about as many R+4 seats as they do R+5, R+6, and so forth. Democrats have a very different profile. Relatively few seats that are light blue, that D+1, D2, D3, but an extraordinary number of seats that are extremely blue. I mean, extremely blue. And so, for example, the number of seats, and I'm calling up some data right here. Let's see if I can find it. That are 15 points or more D15 versus R15. There are only 2 seats in New Hampshire that are redder than R plus 14. There are 32 seats that are bluer than D plus 14. And so this gets a little bit like the Electoral College nationally, part of the challenge Democrats continue to face. In political science terms, we would call this an inefficient votes, wasted votes. They are, excess votes. These are the votes that don't do more to get more people elected, but simply get people's win margins to be bigger. And so there's a Hanover, which is about a D plus 32. It's 32 points more Democratic than the state. There is nothing close to that in New Hampshire for Republicans, where in the very northern part of New Hampshire, there are a couple of House districts at the tippy top of Coos County that are about R plus 15. That's it. They have nothing within 15 points as partisan as Democrats have in places like Hanover and Durham. And so that can warp the popular vote numbers a little bit relative to the number of seats. And some of that is gerrymandering, but some of it is simply the nature of the districts. I'm sorry, the nature of our 2 bases. Democrats have had a more urban and college town base. Republicans have had a more rural base. Um, and so think of it as it is harder it would be harder for Democrats in New Hampshire, even if we wanted to. It would be harder for us to gerrymander with the same level of efficacy down ballot New Hampshire as Republicans are able to. And that has real consequences. So there's certainly a gerrymandering element to it. And we simply have bases that are easier to draw circles around to isolate large numbers of blue, especially in some of the wards in some of the cities where they can take a really blue, like, for example, you can take a really blue ward of Portsmouth that's like a D plus 20 kind of thing. And then you stitch in the little town of Newington to it, for example, which is actually a very purple, very small community. But Newington has no chance of having any real influence in moderating towards Republicans a district that has Portsmouth as its anchor precinct. There are a lot of examples like that around the state, and it's just much harder to identify similar opportunities for Republicans to get gerrymandered, even if that was our goal. So one of the things now, I want to just take a few minutes and some of the districts that we highlighted, and I will invite you by later today or tomorrow, really anytime, go to a few places, movethegoalpostnh.com. That's the website for the Political Action Committee. We have a lot of information there. It will continue to augment. I will have a link to the video for this, and you'll be able to see a lot of the data that way. I would also invite you to go to my YouTube page, or my YouTube channel, rather, and I will have that up there. We've got dozens of videos up already, increasing the content there. Also have a couple of podcasts that, if you like this sort of stuff, you'll definitely like the political podcast. It's called the Steve Marchand Podcast. We spent a lot of money on creative to come up with that title. And trying to get that at least weekly. The next episode will be next Tuesday, and we'll go from there, increasingly talking both to candidates and elected officials, to analysts, and to people who are working in the trenches in different ways. I'll probably have some Republicans on and challenge them, especially some that are offering bills in the legislature this year. Some have expressed interest in sparring, and I'm happy to do that. I think we've got great positions to defend. And also, I want to hear the other arguments because if we're going to get better as a party, as our candidates, our operatives, our activists, I think we need to understand where the other side's coming from, and we need to sharpen our ability to push back on those arguments. And part of that is learning and then being ready to rock. So here are some of the districts that I highlighted. Just you'll appreciate this when you see it in writing when you go on the website. The first category are the 3 seats I mentioned: Mark Vallone, Charlie St. Clair, Hope Damon in Epping, in Laconia, and in the Claremont-Sunapee area. Those are the 3 Democrats in R plus 4 or redder seats. Any path to a Democratic House majority starts at the seats that we already are winning in the hardest districts. It gives us the wiggle room so that we don't have to literally run the table in all the blue and all the light red, because that's a very tough thing to do. The second category and this is very interesting, I think. There are 16 seats in New Hampshire that Democrats won in red districts that are in the light red zone, that R0 to R3. And they fall into, interestingly, two pretty clean buckets. One bucket are suburban seats that are coming towards Democrats, but are not yet blue. So these are seats that 10 years ago wouldn't have been in the light red zone. They would have been in the medium or even dark red zone. But national demographic trends that shows the suburbs moving quickly towards Democrats have taken these seats, made them competitive. We've begun making headway by winning some of the seats in these districts. But in most of these, not all of them, because they still remain highly competitive and in the light red zone, R+1, R+2. What are they? Bedford, which has become the poster child for the suburban shift. Once one of the bedrock communities during the Reagan Revolution, all the way through uh, um, John E. Sununu's victories in the early 2000s, for House and for U.S. Senate. When Republicans are successful, they're able to do well in places like Bedford, but it's getting harder. We have 2 seats there. It's not clear that either of them are running again, which would be a big challenge. There are 7 seats in the district. And so we need to hold those 2, and then we need to make gains. Another suburb of Manchester is the town of Merrimack. It's growing, 8-seat district. It's about an R+1.9 now. We hold 3 of those 8 seats. That one I spent a lot of time in last year. I think there's a candidate quality challenge. If we can increase the number of candidates of the similar quality to the 3 incumbents that we have there, Nancy Murphy, Rosemary Rung, and Representative Thomas, there are real opportunities to add additional seats there. But that's got to be a priority. It's a big town, big district. And then Milford, another suburb out west of Manchester. We have 2 of the 4 seats, still very light red. Got to hold those and try to pick up at least 1 more, I think. Again, the road to 201 requires holding and then making gains there. A couple of other suburban profile, but not in the Manch area. One is Brentwood, which is a little bit west of Exeter. It's looking more and more like the Seacoast, which has become bright, bright blue in the way that it votes. Eric Turer is the rep there. That's going to be a competitive race. It's a 1-seat, very low-cost district, but very high impact. And that's going to Rockingham 6 and Brentwood. And the final one in this bucket is in Barrington, which is almost blue and is somewhat rural, but is starting to see the impact of being close to places like Dover and Durham as housing costs are sprawling people of that political bent further and further away from those communities. Barrington's one of them. 2 seats that we have out of 3. Unfortunately, both have said that unless their plans change, they plan on not running again. And that's a big challenge for Democrats because we're going to have to find 2 new candidates just to hold the 2 seats we currently have there. In that same bucket of really light red that we have of the 16, those are the suburban ones. Here are the ones that are the opposite challenge. Generally, these are blue-collar urban wards and cities that used to be a lot bluer and are now floating away from Democrats. So for the same reason that Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin have become more challenging at the national level, because some of these bedrock communities that used to be blue-collar staples of Democratic base have moved and now are open for Republicans. And there's not any different here. Specifically, Claremont, out in out in Sullivan County, out near the border of Vermont. We have 3 seats in a district there. 2 of them are currently held by Democrats. It's not a coincidence. One of them, John Cloutier, one of the longest standing reps in the entire 400-member House. And then Dale Gerard, who just got reelected mayor on Tuesday night. He's a 2-term mayor. Both wildly overperformed. They have high PAYCO scores, and they need them because Claremont has become a light red community. Used to be a reliable blue community. We got to hold those 2. And we got to pick off the 3rd. We got some great people there. Gary Merchant, former rep, and if he runs again, I hope future rep, is a really good example of somebody who has a high PAYCO score and I think could overperform again there and win that 3rd seat. Rochester may be which is in Stratford County, little north of Dover and Somersworth. Rochester, we just did an event there last week. It is one of the bellwether communities in the entire state of New Hampshire. As Rochester goes, so goes the nation, or at least so goes New Hampshire. It's a blue collar community. It's one of the biggest cities in the state. People forget that. There's been some injection because of some large businesses that have moved into the Rochester area of demographic change. So we have a bit of higher income, more white collar work that has begun to come into the region, which is helping bluify a couple of wards of Rochester. Two of the ones that are light red that we have to try to hold on to. John LaRochelle, former mayor of Rochester, which is part of how he won. That's a bigger district, a float district. And then Stratford 9, which is Rochester Ward 6. Amy Malone, who has some great roots in the community, and it is the most neutral House district in New Hampshire. It is 1/10 of a point from being dead zero. Malone narrowly won that race. Unfortunately, I don't believe that she's going to be running again in 2026. And so Rochester is going to be one of the most important communities in the entire state. The road to a House majority for Democrats goes through Rochester. And if it's close, it may go through for the Republicans as well. It's going to be, that's right. And our county chair in Stratford County, Walter King, good friend Walter, notes John LaRochelle just won a council seat as well. I just saw John. I spent about 20 minutes chatting with him after the event in Rochester. Wonderful guy. We love the French Canadian former mayors. No bias. And John, in a lot of ways, is just out of central casting for how to win in these light red, blue collar wards, and in this case, House districts. Two others. One is Swansea, one of the under noticed stories in New Hampshire politics that has the potential of being a real fly in the ointment if we don't address it as Democrats. A lot of people think of Cheshire County in southwestern New Hampshire as blue because Keene is there, and Keene is deep blue. However, if you look at the communities in western Cheshire County and southern Cheshire County, those are a lot of blue collar communities that in many cases used to be very solidly blue and have just fundamentally changed. They have collapsed towards Republicans over the last 6 to 10 years. It began during the Obama years and accelerated during the Trump years. And there are some of those districts where, to me, it's at least yellow alarm, if not red alarm. It is very hard to get back a majority if we are not holding the seats we have there and maybe trying to rectify and flip at least one or two of them. One of those is Cheshire 10. That's Swansea, just west of Keene. We have Barry Faulkner, who was able to hold on. Barry, longtime rep, deep roots in the community, able to survive the trend lines that I'm describing. It's a 2-seat district, and we used to have two candidates who had those level of roots. The second one retired, and we had a good candidate, but not quite those roots, and that seat got flipped. So if we're going to flip seats in the suburbs on the road to 201, we can't get in a position where we're losing those gains because of seats like this one. And then finally, Manchester Ward 6. Dan Bergeron was able to win a seat in a pretty tough Democratic a tough ward for Democrats. Manchester, which obviously the mayor won by about 20 points, Jay Rouet, and congrats to him. I do think that as for a last minute candidate, Jess Spiller's comported herself quite well. And I think getting north of 40% in that situation, given the resource difference, given the name ID difference, given Rouet's general popularity, pretty impressive. And so big props to Jess for stepping up. And I think her ability to break that 40% threshold is a big reason why Democrats made pretty significant gains in the aldermanic chamber and absolutely crushed the school board committee, the Board of Education there. And so down ballot was a pretty good story for Democrats last night. Obviously, Rouet's reelection, a bright spot for Republicans. But at the state rep, the even numbered year level, a lot of challenges in Manchester. Used to be a bedrock of Democratic numbers to try to get to a majority, and that is wobbly. So Manchester Ward 6 is one of those. It's a real challenge. Third bucket, There are 11 seats that lean Democratic that Republicans won in 2024. So out of 171 blue seats, we went 160 and 11. So there are 11 we lost. And the story's not that different. Some of these are seats that are light blue and slowly moving towards Democrats. So they're deeper in the process of transitioning to Democratic solid seats. But a lot of these are blue collar urban seats that are going the wrong way and that pose a challenge. Here they are. So 5 of the 11 are in Manchester, a seat in Ward 5, 7, and 10. All 3 of those are wards that are moving away from Democrats. So they still have Democratic PVIs, but they are moving quickly towards the Republicans. And then in Manchester, wards 9 and 12 are 2 that are moving towards Democrats. And so that should give us some hope that we can hold those seats, or rather flip those seats. But those are individual seats in those 2 wards that Republicans hold in wards 9 and 12. So those are 5 seats right there just in Manchester, plus Bergeron, who barely won in a red-leaning seat. Those are 6 seats that are at the dead center of the battle for the majority of the New Hampshire House. There are 6 other seats. I said there are 11 in all, won by Republicans in Democratic PBI districts. 5 of them are in Manch. The other 6, 2 of them are in Nashua, Ward 6 and Ward 9. Both of those trending actually pretty sharply towards Republicans. Nashua is not in as much of a pickle as Manchester is, but the dynamic is the same. Nashua is simply a bluer community than Manchester is. And so some of this dynamic of blue-collar wards in cities moving towards Republicans pretty quickly, that is much further down the line in Manchester than Nashua. But I do put up the alarm that without some intervention to do something about these trend lines, that Nashua may have some seats that are going to be a lot more competitive in the Republicans' favor, that they will have a better chance of winning as early as 2026, but certainly 2028, and Nashua, Ward 6 and Ward 9. Up north again, Gorham, which is the bluest city left in Coos County, it has a seat that the GOP won. We did not compete really there. We had a candidate who ended up kind of having to back out. So it gives us a hard time knowing how competitive it would have been in a truly competitive head-to-head race. It's a 1-seat district. That one remains Democratic, but is collapsing towards Republicans. I think that recruitment is going to be everything there in Gorham because it is a winnable seat for Democrats. And again, if you're trying to get to 201, you got to hold almost all the blue seats. That one is one that to talk about. And then the last seat that is moving towards Republicans in this bucket is out in Cheshire County again. Same story as I said about Swansea before. This is Cheshire 9. That's Alstead and Stoddard. That's a little north and east of Keene. We had Dan Eden, who was a stalwart member of the community there, but the district has been moving quickly towards Republicans. And even with Dan's relatively high PACO score and deep roots in the community, we were unable to hold on to that one. And that's going to be a challenge in 2026 that we have to address. The final 2 seats of these 11 that are right in the center of the bullseye are ones that are light blue, but moving quickly towards Democrats. And so these should be some of our best opportunities to flip a seat. One is about 2 miles from me right here in Northampton. It's the town of Hampton. Used to be a solidly Republican, not deep red, but solidly Republican. It has moved. The influence of Portsmouth has not quite made it down to Hampton, but it's getting there. And for the first time in a generation or more, Hampton now has a blue PVI, albeit by a tiny fraction of a point. And so of the 4 seats, 3 are held by Democrats. Can't take them for granted. There's a 4th seat. That 4th seat is held by a Republican who is a pretty good match for the district. So I'll give props to the GOP for matching that one up pretty well. But he will be vulnerable, particularly if 2026 is a pretty good year for Democrats. The final seat's in Hollis, which is a bellwether suburban community in the state of New Hampshire. It had voted Republican every election going back to the 50s, except for Barry Goldwater in 1964, until Obama won it in 2008 narrowly. Romney won it back in 2012, and then Democrats have won it since 2016. There's a little bit of a lag effect down ballot, but that lag effect has now caught up, I guess. And now Hollis is a light blue community. They have a couple of districts that include Hollis. One of them was a flotarial that went from Republican to Democrat and then back to Republican. That's going to be one of the most interesting and important seats in the state in 2026. Hollis is, to me, one of the most fascinating political communities in New Hampshire and a beautiful town to boot. The final bucket is a big one. And so we didn't get all into it last night because it's too early. The hurricane's eye of the hurricane is simply too far from the shore to make tight projections. But think of it this way. There are 36 seats that are light red, R0 to R3, currently held by Republicans. 36. Any discussion beyond the seats that we've gone through on this Substack Live today that get Democrats to a majority, particularly a working majority of, say, 210 or more, involve going from winning a chunk, a minority of these, roughly 30% of these light red seats to winning a majority of these light red seats. In fact, we probably would need to win something like half of these remaining 36 light red seats held by Republicans in order for the math to work out. So, and then beyond that, there's 61 seats that are in the medium red that are held by Republicans. And as you may recall from earlier in this broadcast, they almost all, it's very hard to flip a lot of those. We can look at about a half dozen of those that are winnable in a distinct way. A lot of the analytics that I've created, some of which we've described today, help us identify where the best opportunities are. Recruiting is going to matter. And it's too early to say from any of those seats, but the bullseye, the lion's share of the action outside of the ones we talked about specifically today are going to be in those 36 R0 to R3 light red seats currently held by Republicans. So as we approach the end here, one of the things that we showed last night and that you might enjoy is we try to triangulate, to use different metrics to identify opportunities in the crosshair. So, for example, what are the districts in that bucket that have a PVI that is closest to zero? In other words, the least red of the red, combined with which ones have trend lines that are moving the fastest towards Democrats. And so, for example, and you'll see this when you look at the online, there are districts like Milford is moving towards Democrats and is almost at zero. We have two seats. They have one Republican and the other two that's super strong. That third seat there is a bullseye seat in all likelihood. I look at Hillsborough 42, which is one of my favorite ones in the state, just west of Manchester, west of Goffstown, is a 3-seat district that includes New Boston and Mount Vernon and Lineborough. In 2022, we came close to winning 2 of those 3 seats, but we didn't win any of them. And in 2024, we did not either. Excellent local committees, small district, 5,700 votes in 2022. And the last off-year election for 3 seats. That's a really efficient district. I think we got some fantastic candidates who may run there and is galloping towards the Democratic Party, particularly the town of New Boston, which is the large town of that district. That's an example of a district that if you're trying to sift through these light red seats, where is the best bang for the buck? Where is there well-organized local committees? Where do we have potentially strong candidates? Where do we have competitiveness? Different ways of showing that metric. That's one of them. I mentioned Bedford earlier. Bedford is moving so quickly towards Democrats. It would be very hard to get a majority if we don't add at least 1, preferably 2, to get to 3 or 4 of the 7 Bedford seats into the Democratic column after 2026. And so that's an example of one there. There's Sullivan 5, which is a very, it's about an R+1 that we have held back and forth several times over the last decade. That's one that is moving very quickly towards Democrats as well. There are certain towns in Sullivan County that are getting blue very quickly in and around Sunapee. Typically higher education, higher income, a lot of retired folks moving to some of these communities. And that's changing the political profile of those communities in a way that gives us increasingly a real way of flipping seats over there. So there are a lot of examples, and you can see them on the chart as well. And we have different ways of trying to triangulate and identify the best opportunities within those buckets. Last a couple things I want to mention. One, the Don Rumsfeld thing, the known knowns, the known unknowns, the unknown unknowns. What are the known knowns? Well, we know that candidate recruitment matters, that it can get you an extra 2, 3, 4 points over a more generic Democratic candidate. If you hit the jackpot, you can get an extra 6, 7, 8 points in a handful of cases. And that takes red districts and moves them squarely into play, which is critical. We know that, we control that. And so a known is the recruiting element. We also know things like the trajectory of a lot of these, pardon me, a lot of these districts. And so we know, because I've been doing this long enough, we can see that trajectory extending over sometimes over a decade. That's not likely to change anytime soon. And that means that we can count on that as well. There are a lot of things that we do know and that are going to help target um, the known unknowns. So there are things we know we don't know. Who will our gubernatorial nominee is? John Kuiper is the only announced Democratic candidate. We have at least one other, Mary Beth Waltz, former longtime legislator in the Hopkinton Bow, in the Bow area rather, who is exploring it. There are other folks, perhaps with greater name ID and perhaps greater ability to fundraise and maybe garner support. That would make a real difference potentially. So far, we've not had a lot of folks beyond the two names look at it. Take it from me. I've run for the office before. I managed governor's races. And when I look at the approval ratings for first-term Governor Kelly Ayotte, they are historically low relative to any governor of either party in my lifetime, certainly since the early 80s, since I was a little kid, almost my lifetime. She, in the last couple polls, has pulled net in the single digits. One was a net approval rating of +1. One, I believe, was +8. To give you context, at this point, Chris Sununu, Maggie Hassan, John Lynch, even Craig Benson, who ended up being the only one to lose a first-term reelection bid, all of them had approval ratings of 20 plus 25 or greater at this point. Craig Benson at this point was about +30 approval rating. Kelly Ayotte is in the single digits. Why? It is not because voters are saying, according to the various polls, they're not saying that she has done a specific thing that is dreadful. It is because they see her, unlike Lynch, Sununu, and to some extent Hassan, as just another Republican. If you look at particularly Sununu and Lynch, they were able to get approval ratings regularly north of 60% throughout 4 terms, in no small part because there was a margin of about 15+% of voters who normally would have been the other party who said they approved of Lynch and Sununu. They saw Lynch as not your typical Democrat. They saw Sununu as not your typical Republican. There are a lot of reasons why they did. Some of it's stylistic, some of it's rhetorical, some of it is policy. It doesn't matter. There are a lot of ways to kind of get to that place. Kelly Ayotte simply doesn't have that. Why? I think some of it may be that she, frankly, is not as dynamic in terms of the public persona as certainly Chris Sununu. And I think she's not had as many opportunities to try to exhibit independence. And when she has, with a couple of exceptions, she has not chosen to embrace that in a way that has broken through, certainly in the diffused media landscape. And that's hard to do. That's hard to do. And so if her approval rating remains in the mid to high 40s, with a disapproval rating in the low to mid 40s, almost by definition, historically, any Democratic nominee who is able to, you know, run the ball and not fumble, so to speak, is probably going to be within 5 points with 2 weeks to go. That is an enormous factor in how high the floor for down ballot Democratic candidates will be. Even if we did not beat Kelly Ayotte, but we got to 48% of the two-party vote compared to, say, 42% of the two-party vote, that extra 6 points will translate to, based on my models, at least an extra 4 points of Democratic performance in terms of the floor down ballot. And since most candidates are not well known down ballot, that's a really big deal. That extra 4 points is worth a lot. So quality recruiting particularly targeted in the districts that we know. We have the analytics to identify emerging opportunities and threats. We can do that now. That's the known known. The known unknown is the top of the ticket. We also don't know what Donald Trump's approval rating will be in November of 2026. We don't know that. Um, right now, I did some early modeling. It seems hard to imagine a scenario today where we would have fewer House seats than we have right now. So it would take Trump getting to an approval rating that would be around a record high for him of the high 40s in order to really make a dent to get us below where we're at right now. Another would be if Kelly Ayotte were to break 60% of the popular vote in the two-party vote for governor. If we run a competent Democratic nominee, or better, obviously, it will be very unlikely for her to do anything close to 60. And again, I'm arguing it's going to be very tough for her to break about 53 if we compete, not at the expense in terms of resources of down ballot races. That we got to do that. Uh, but a lot of this deals with the candidate quality and our ability as a party to get behind the nominee, to develop a message, to homogenize that message top to bottom, and then go get it. A couple of questions I see here. How much momentum do you think Democrats can leverage from the elections this week? They're the short answer here. What's the lesson? Look, high quality. Um, if you can take an affordability message, if you can take a cost of living message, and you can personalize it to the contours of the race you are running in, you can have a lot of success right now, given Trump's low approval rating on the economy. In New York City, Mamdani won that race by crafting it for a very New York City centric message. He focused on the rent, he focused on the groceries, he focused on public transportation. In New Jersey, they talked a lot more. The winner there, Terrell, talked a lot more about utility bills, electric bills. And in New Jersey, that's a hot issue. So she took the affordability and used its contours to focus on that. This is exactly the way to do it. In New Hampshire, I would argue, look, utilities, obviously, that's the factor. We have some of the highest electric rates in the country. We're entering a heating system. A lot of folks, when they turn that dial to turn the heat on, are going to feel the pain very quickly. I would argue property tax, though, is the bullseye. That is the place where we can merge the affordability argument that is so critical with the specific contours of New Hampshire politics and policy. Whatever party is able to win the perception that they are doing more to have your back on property taxes and others. Healthcare would be in there somewhere. Childcare, although that seems like a tougher nut to crack. I know Ayotte has just proposed forming a commission to take a look at it. That's the easy part. Policy's tougher, and I'm not sure that that's one that either party right now, in the eyes of the voters, has a dominant brand about. But on property tax, that is the big one, and that is the opportunity. And the second thing is talent, uh, quality of candidate. Mamdani is a hyper charismatic individual who also understood social media and was able to leverage 2% in the polls to a double-digit win in the general, in no small part because of high-quality candidate with a campaign that understood where the opportunities were. And I think in both New Jersey and Virginia, both were able to exude high levels of competence. They both were an excellent match for states that are light to medium blue and have a lot of voters that have their general profile, that kind of higher income, higher education, of course, both with the military background, which is extremely attractive in particularly in Virginia, which has a large percentage of that. You got to match the talent. So nothing, you can't replace talent. We need to maximize talent up and down the ballot. And one thing I implore everybody, just because you go, I'm not sure my House or Senate district is winnable. I don't know how important recruiting is going to be. I don't know if we can win. Recruiting does matter because this could be a big blue wave year. There are elements, versions of the model that show a pretty dynamic blue year. And I'm not saying it will be, but right now the floor is pretty high and the ceiling is pretty high. And what would just kill me, and I've seen it before, is when we recruit. When we do not recruit in districts because we think they're not terribly competitive, And then they end up being sneaky competitive. And we realized that if we had had a candidate that maybe had that kind of Payco ability of a +3 or more score, that would have been enough to take them over the finish line. I think that we have to take a lot of these R+4, R+5, even R+6 districts and not throw them out immediately as unwinnable, because in the early versions of the model, I just think we have at the moment, a high floor, high ceiling, and we should be treating it that way. Final thing, unknown unknowns. There are things we don't know. Nobody thought in January of 2020 that COVID was going to change everything. Nobody thought on Labor Day of 2001 that 9/11 was going to change everything. Even things that may seem a little smaller, but make a really big deal in individual circumstances. John Lynch, nobody knew when he got elected that there would be historic and indeed deadly flooding in Western New Hampshire that would require strong and unique levels of leadership. And he did that. And his approval rating, he handled it expertly. And folks that were around at that time may recall his approval ratings blew up north of 70%. That was I believe, in 05. And he maintained them. In 2006, he got 75% of the vote for governor. In 08, he got nearly 75% again. Those were the two biggest Democratic nights in the history of the New Hampshire House. And it's because John Lynch was a dominant figure. And we did not know that one of the factors that would take him from successful and popular to historically so was a natural disaster. So it doesn't have to be 9/11 or a pandemic. It can be. It can also be economic problems. It could be localized issues where a governor handles themselves in an expertly well or a really terrible way. These make a difference. Those are the unknown unknowns. One last a couple of questions here. I saw Matt Stover. Great to see you on this, Matt. The election in Berlin on Tuesday, I think that is a data point that we can use, as we can select in local races, though it's a different animal in important ways, to understand what's working and not working. One of the advantages of doing this work for many years and doing 2026 this far out is that we can try stuff. We can evaluate success and failure. We can measure things along with my good friends and cohorts in work that we do here. Nicole Bump, the Goffstown Town Chair, Shana Potvin in Bedford, who has too many titles to list. She's on the Rules Committee and Executive Director of the Rockingham County Dems. Both of them and myself, we work on a communications model we call You Are the Media, to help people at the precinct level understand the values driving the voters in every precinct in New Hampshire, the language that goes with that, the kind of voters they are. These are the kind of voters that we're not winning. And how do we get leverage our activists in ways that can begin to make outreach, not using our language, our values, our prism, but using it through the prism that the voters that we once had and are now losing, how they see the world, and go to where they are. And if you go to movethegoalpostnh.com, you can see some of the work that we're doing there, as well as on the YouTube channel. So let's use these opportunities to study what's working and not working. So to Matt's point, and then Martin Murray, great to see Martin here. Great info, relationship with NHDP. Obviously, I've been around the game here for almost 25 years. I do not have any formal role in the party, although I'm hoping that we can find opportunities to work in a professional manner. And because obviously, Shana, Nicole, myself, we can't do this for free or almost free indefinitely. And a lot of my time has to be spent on other work, including non-political work, in order to pay the bills. But look, if I could wave a magic wand, we're raising money that allows us to pay for the technology that goes behind this, to pay for the professional time and so forth. But we're always trying to raise money and would love to find partnerships with various democratic entities in order to do this. And I'm hopeful. It's a difficult process, but it doesn't stop the work that we're doing. Obviously, in the meantime, as I hope that comes across here. So we'll keep you posted on that. And shame on me. If you go to movethegoalpostnh.com, you can donate there by law. I've got to mention that. We've been methodically raising money. It's been a grassroots effort in a lot of ways. Some folks have been extremely generous, and so many of you, whether it's 25, 50, $100, or folks that are giving 3, 4, or even 5 digits in a few cases, all of that makes a big difference. It allows us to take more and more of our bandwidth and focus it on taking the work that we're describing here and just do this thing relentlessly, because obviously it's a passion, and I think we can do awfully well in 2026 and beyond. I mean, we're trying to help be part of building a Democratic Party in New Hampshire. My goal, speaking for myself, is I want us to have durable, governing sized majorities, trifectas. I want us to win that governor seat, state Senate, state House. I want the executive council back. It is doable, but it takes sort of generational perspective in terms of the type of work, the commitment to sticking with it. And I believe that the analytics are a big part of that, and the relationships. A lot of the work, I'm on the road several days a week. Tonight, we'll be in Northwood, working with folks in Rockingham 1, which is one of the target communities. Tomorrow night, I'll be speaking with the Milford Democrats, a little bit broader. They're having their big fundraiser, Italian dinner. Some of the best fundraiser food in New Hampshire in my 20 years is always the Italian food in Milford. So I'll be one of the keynotes there, and they're looking for something a little bit, I think, broader about what our message should be as Democrats. How do we win not just the technical side that we're focusing on today, but also the message? And as somebody who's spent a lot of time on this stuff, I'll put my 2 cents in there and try to leave people ready to rock and roll. So those are some of the questions. I realize we're past 1 o'clock, and I appreciate those of you. We still have people rolling in, but there is work to do. We will get this also, this has been recorded. We'll get this up as well. Last thing I would mention, go to movethegoalpostnh.com to learn more, to donate, all of that. It's all there for you. I have a pair of podcasts. One of them is a political one, the Steve Marchand podcast. You can find that on iTunes. You can find that on Spotify. Have episodes just up, and we'll have a few more over the next week. And also have many of those episodes on YouTube, the video version. Also have a sports one. So those of you that know me know I'm a big sports guy. Went to Syracuse originally to be a sportscaster. Eventually realized that was a hobby, not a vocation. But my passion for sports is unmatched. And honestly, I think Democrats need to get more in the game in terms of sports fandom and how we communicate, the places that we go, the places that we campaign, the places that we recreate with the people who love sports, who have moved in a Republican direction, according to polls, over the last 10 plus years. So that podcast is called By the Numbers. I have an episode that just went up Monday night where we reviewed the Patriots' nail-biter victory over the Atlanta Falcons, our 6th win in a row. We're 7-2. We played one of the easiest schedules, the easiest schedule in the NFL and one of the easiest ones in recent years in the NFL. We have arguably one of our toughest games of the year this Sunday in Tampa. It's going to be a real litmus test about how real that 7-2 record really is. I know we got a real quarterback and a real coach. I think Drake May and Mike Vrabel are the real deal. I think this team is very good. We talked about that. We talked a little bit about the Baseball Hall of Fame as well. I'm a huge baseball guy. I had Joe Pace, who is a 20-year friend, a political guy, and a big, legit sports fan. And Joe and I went through that a little bit in our Gen X kind of way. If you enjoy that sort of thing, go to By the Numbers. It's a sports podcast, and I've got several episodes already up doing that on a weekly basis. I've got folks that listen to it, and then they come for the sports and they stay for the politics. And I think that's the kind of thing we need to do as Democrats. You don't always have to talk politics with your friends who don't like politics. You should not. Talk to them about the thing that you care about, that you share with them. That's not politics. They'll come for that. And then some of them will stay for the politics. And that's part of how we do this. So playing the long game on these podcasts, it's a labor of love. And it's drawing people. Last thing, if you're here, you're probably familiar with Substack. You can go to stevemarchand.com. My Substack has been growing. We're up north of 12,000 subscribers and has frequently been one of the fastest growing political podcasts in the country. Take a lot of time on that. If you are not a subscriber, please do so. It's free. If you're not a paid subscriber, shame on me on that. We have hundreds of paid subscribers, and they allow me to dedicate more time to the content. And if you read it, I think you'll find A lot of nerding out on politics there. And those of you particularly who are on our paid subscriber list, it's $8 a month. It's $80 a year. And it allows me to dedicate more time to that. And it really, it's all about finding the time to do as many of these things as possible. So those are the shameless plugs. Join us next Tuesday at noon. We'll be doing a Substack Live with State Representative Tom Opel. We're going to talk about his political past. He's been a national level respected operative consultant earlier in his career. He is now a first-term state rep in a light blue district who has really sophisticated, deep thoughts about what we need to do as a party in order to address the looming education funding crisis and do it in a way that's politically wise, but also policy wise, is going to put the kids in some of our poorer communities back where they need to be, which is in the center of our priority list. So I look forward to that with Tom Tuesday at noon for another Substack Live. I thank you all again for being here. I hope you had some lunch while we were doing this. I'm going to have my lunch right now. And I look forward to hearing from and seeing many of you very soon. Thanks a lot, guys, and appreciate it. We will. Oh, question. I assume you'll remind subscribers when it's time to renew. Indeed, you get an auto renewal at that time. Auto renewal notice. You'll have the opportunity when your subscription comes up. So yes, you will find out. Thank you, Cora, and thank you again for the suggestion on the tea. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you all again soon.